My heart nearly stopped when those words appeared in the chat box during our weekly video call. Don't speak, just listen. My 16-year-old granddaughter Emily's face showed no emotion as she typed, but her eyes darted nervously to something off-screen. I'm Harold Peterson, 68 years old, and that message changed everything I thought I knew about my family. Behind Emily, I could see shadows moving across the wall of her bedroom. Someone else was there, listening, watching. My finger hovered over the volume button, ready to speak, to ask what was happening. But something in her eyes stopped me. Fear. Pure, unmistakable fear. Emily started typing again, her fingers trembling slightly. Dad's been acting strange since Mom died. He has people at the house. I don't feel safe. I watched in horror as she quickly deleted these messages after I read them. 3 other people could see this was happening. My daughter-in-law's sister Maggie, who had joined the call from her home in Boston, my current wife Elaine sitting beside me, and my neighbor Frank, who had stopped by to return a borrowed tool and was now frozen beside us, witnessing this unfold. What Emily didn't know was that I had much more than just concern to offer. What my son Robert didn't know was that his father wasn't just a retired high school teacher with a modest pension. But the truth about that would have to wait. I nodded slightly to show I understood, trying to keep my expression neutral, as if we were just having our usual Sunday catch-up. But inside, my mind was racing, my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't just a cry for help. It was a carefully calculated risk my granddaughter was taking, right under the nose of whatever danger lurked in that house. Our family had once been so close, so normal. Every summer, Robert would bring Emily and her mom, Laura, to stay with me at the lake house for 2 weeks. Those were golden days filled with fishing trips, campfires, and Emily's delighted squeals as she learned to water ski. I taught her to bait a hook when she was just 6, her small hands determined despite her initial squeamishness about touching the worms. "You're the best grandpa in the world," she'd declare, throwing her arms around my neck after I helped her reel in her first base. Robert would smile proudly, taking photos to document these milestones. Laura would prepare picnic lunches for our adventures, always remembering my favorite potato salad with extra dill. Sunday dinners were sacred in our family. Robert would drive Emily and Laura the 30 minutes to my house every week, and we'd gather around my dining table. "Dad makes the best roast beef in 3 counties," Robert would tell Emily when she was little. She'd giggle and nod enthusiastically, even before she was old enough to have visited 3 different counties. "One day, I'll learn all Grandpa's recipes," Emily once announced at age 10. "And when I have kids, they'll come over for Sunday dinner too." Laura had been the perfect daughter-in-law, kind, thoughtful, and she truly seemed to enjoy my company, rather than just tolerate it out of obligation. "Harold," she once told me during Christmas preparations, "I never had a father growing up. Having you in our lives means everything to me." Those words had touched me deeply, made me feel that the family I'd built after my wife Betty's death was truly solid. Betty would have loved Laura too, I often thought. She would have been proud of the man our son had become, responsible, hard-working, devoted to his family. I never imagined those days were numbered, I whispered to myself now, watching Emily's frightened face on the screen. I never thought we could lose so much so quickly. After Betty died of cancer when Robert was just 17, I devoted everything to making sure he had the future he deserved. The life insurance payout from Betty's policy wasn't large, just $45,000, but I put every penny toward Robert's education. I sold my woodworking tools that I'd collected over decades, getting $7,500 that paid for his first semester's books and housing costs. When his old car broke down during his sophomore year, I took out a $12,000 loan against my teacher's pension to buy him a reliable replacement. Dad, you shouldn't have, he'd protested, but I insisted. Your mother would want you to succeed, I told him. That means having reliable transportation for internships and job interviews. For his wedding to Laura, I contributed $20,000, money I had been saving for my own retirement. When they found the perfect starter home but came up short on the down payment, I gave them another $30,000 without hesitation. Consider it an early inheritance, I told Robert, when he tried to refuse. When Emily was born, I started a college fund for her, putting in $200 every month from my teacher's salary, even when it meant I had to pick up extra summer school classes to make ends meet. By the time she was 10, I had saved over $24,000 for her education. After I retired, I continued to help however I could. When Robert lost his job during the economic downturn, I covered their mortgage for 6 months, $9,600 that came directly from my limited retirement funds. It's just temporary, Dad, Robert had assured me. I'll pay you back when I'm back on my feet. I never asked for repayment. When Laura got sick 3 years ago, I moved into their guest room for 4 months to help with Emily in the household, while Robert took Laura to her treatments. I used another $15,000 from my savings to help cover medical expenses their insurance wouldn't pay for. I don't know what we'd do without you, Dad, Robert had said one night, his eyes red from exhaustion and grief as Laura's condition worsened. You've always been there for us. The irony of those words stung now as I watched Emily silently plead for help through the computer screen. After all those years of sacrifice, after all I had given, my son somehow become someone his daughter feared. How had things gone so terribly wrong? Looking back, the changes in Robert had been subtle at first. After Laura died from breast cancer 2 years ago, his initial grief was expected. The withdrawn behavior, the occasional irritability, the distraction. We all understood he needed time, but then came behaviors I couldn't easily explain away. 3 months after the funeral, he missed Emily's piano recital, something the old Robert would never have done. Work emergency, he texted me afterward, though Emily later mentioned he'd been home all evening. When I called to check in, our conversations grew shorter. Everything's fine, Dad, became his standard response to any question about how they were coping. The Sunday dinners became less frequent, then stopped altogether about 8 months ago. Robert's just busy with his new position, I explained to my wife, Elaine, trying to convince myself more than her. He got that promotion he wanted. 6 months ago, I drove to their house unannounced, concerned after 3 unanswered phone calls. Robert's driveway held an unfamiliar car with out-of-state plates. When I rang the doorbell, Robert answered, looking disheveled and tense. Dad, this isn't a good time, he said, barely opening the door. I caught a glimpse of a woman I didn't recognize sitting at what had been Laura's desk in the living room. Before I could say anything, he added, I'll call you tomorrow, and closed the door. The promised call never came. When I did manage to see Emily at her school's spring concert, I noticed changes in her, too. My once vibrant, chatty granddaughter seemed subdued, her clothes hanging loosely on her frame. Is everything okay, sweetheart? I asked her afterward. Dad's been working a lot, she said vaguely, her eyes darting to where Robert stood talking intensely with a sharp-dressed man I didn't know. He has business associates over most nights now. When I approached them, Robert quickly ended his conversation. Dad, you remember Kevin, he said, though I'd never met the man. From the office. Kevin's handshake was too firm, his smile never reaching his eyes. Robert speaks highly of you, sir, he said, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. Last month, my neighbor Maggie, Laura's sister, called me with concerns. Emily called me asking for money, she said. She said Robert took her ATM card with her savings from her summer job. When I asked why, she just said he needed it for investments and hung up when I pressed for details. The final alarm came just last week when I drove past their house and noticed a new security system had been installed. Cameras pointing in all directions, including at the front door. Robert had always scoffed at such measures in their safe suburban neighborhood. My attempts to call were met with brief, hurried conversations. Dad, we're fine. Just busy with some new business opportunities. I'll explain everything soon. But the unease grew in my stomach like a stone. Something was wrong in that house. And now, watching Emily's silent plea for help on my computer screen, I knew my concerns had been tragically justified. I maintained a neutral expression during the rest of our video call, following Emily's lead by chatting about innocent topics, her upcoming history test, the book she was reading for English class. But my mind was working overtime, trying to piece together what might be happening in my son's house. After the call ended, I immediately phoned my old friend Marcus, a retired police detective. I need your help, and I need absolute discretion, I told him, explaining the situation. Harold, if your granddaughter is in danger, we should call the authorities right away, he advised. And tell them what? That she typed a cryptic message? That my son seems different? We need more to go on first, I insisted. Robert has become connected somehow. When I drove by last month, there was a police cruiser in his driveway, socially, not officially. Over the next 2 weeks, I began a careful investigation. I created a new email address and sent Emily a message letting her know she could contact me there if she needed to. 3 days later, a response arrived. Dad's involved with some dangerous people. They're using our house for meetings. I think it's about money. Lots of money. He's not the same anymore. He watches everything I do. He installed something on my phone and computer to track me. I'm using the library computer now. Please be careful. I discovered that Robert had taken control of Emily's college fund, the money I'd been saving for years. The account had been emptied 6 months ago, all $42,000 gone, with a transfer signature I couldn't quite verify as my son's normal handwriting. Through Marcus's contacts, we learned that Robert had taken out a second mortgage on the house that Laura had loved so much. The money, $175,000, had been withdrawn in cash over several transactions. Nobody takes out that much cash for legitimate business, Marcus warned me. This smells like either gambling debts or some kind of investment scam he's gotten mixed up in. When I tried to visit them again, a new face answered the door. A muscular man who identified himself as Home Security. He politely but firmly informed me that Mr. Peterson isn't available and suggested I call before coming next time. I began documenting everything, the mysterious visitors, the changes in Robert's behavior, Emily's messages. I took photos of the strange cars parked outside their house from a distance, noting license plates when possible. One vehicle appeared repeatedly, an expensive black SUV with tinted windows registered to a company called Summit Investments that, according to Marcus's research, had been investigated twice for fraud, but never charged. Most disturbing was what Emily's teacher, Mrs. Keller, told me when I accidentally ran into her at the grocery store. I'm concerned about Emily, she confided after some gentle prompting. She's withdrawn in class, her grades are slipping, and twice now she's fallen asleep at her desk. When I asked if everything was all right at home, she just nodded and hurried away. Yesterday, I noticed what looked like a bruise on her wrist, partially covered by her bracelet. My blood ran cold. If someone had put their hands on my granddaughter. I hired a private investigator who specialized in financial fraud. His report confirmed my worst fears. Robert appeared to be involved in an investment scheme targeting wealthy retirees. The business associates frequenting my son's home were known confidence men with records in multiple states. Your son could be a victim who got pulled in deeper, the investigator suggested, or he could be a willing participant. Either way, he's in trouble, legally and probably financially. And based on what you're telling me about his daughter's behavior, the situation at home has become volatile. I felt physically ill. The son I'd raised, the boy who'd once been so honest and hard-working, was now potentially involved in defrauding elderly people like me. And worse, he was allowing his own daughter to feel unsafe in her home. When Emily managed to call me from a friend's phone, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Grandpa, there was a fight last night. Dad and one of the men were yelling about money that's missing. They think someone stole from them. Dad threw something that broke against the wall. I locked myself in my room, but I'm scared. They've been drinking a lot. Dad never used to drink." "Do you want me to come get you?" I asked immediately. "No." Her voice was sharp with fear. "They watch the house. They'd know. I need to figure out a safe way. Dad's not himself. He keeps saying once the investment pays off, we'll be set for life. But I think they're just using him." Before hanging up, she whispered something that haunted me. "I found Mom's journals. She was worried about Dad before she died. She wrote that he was talking to people online about guaranteed returns and exclusive investment opportunities. She tried to warn him. The pieces started coming together when I received an unexpected visitor. Laura's former colleague from the accounting firm where she'd worked. Judith had been out of the country for an extended assignment and had just learned of Laura's passing. "I'm so sorry I couldn't be at the funeral," she said as we sat in my living room. "Laura was not just a colleague, but a dear friend." As we shared memories, Judith hesitated, then asked, "Did Laura ever share her concerns about Robert's business activities with you?" My attention sharpened. "What concerns?" Judith explained that in the months before her diagnosis, Laura had consulted her about large sums moving through their personal accounts. She found transfers, $20,000 here, $35,000 there, going to offshore accounts. When she questioned Robert, he said they were investments with guaranteed returns, but wouldn't provide documentation. "Laura was an accountant," Judith continued. "She knew the warning signs of a Ponzi scheme. She was gathering evidence to confront Robert with when she got sick." This revelation sent me digging through the boxes of Laura's personal effects that Robert had asked me to store after her death. Too painful to keep at the house, he'd claimed. In a folder marked Tax Records 2022, I found what Laura had hidden: detailed records of suspicious transactions, copies of emails between Robert and men, with names I now recognized from the private investigator's report, and a half-written letter to the SEC expressing her concerns. Most damning was a flash drive containing recorded conversations. Laura had secretly recorded Robert discussing returns of 30% guaranteed and plans to bring in bigger fish once they had proof of concept with the initial investors. "We're not doing anything illegal," Robert's voice insisted to someone on the recording. "We're just connecting investors with opportunities they wouldn't have access to otherwise. The paperwork just hasn't caught up to the actual investments yet." The other voice, smooth, confident, replied, "Exactly. And by the time anyone might question anything, we'll have the real investments generating actual returns. No one gets hurt. Everyone makes money." It was clear from the recordings that Robert had initially been drawn in as an investor himself, pouring in family savings with the promise of extraordinary returns. But somewhere along the line, he'd crossed over from victim to participant, lured by promises of wealth beyond anything his middle management job could provide. Most shocking was finding a list of potential investors in Laura's files, a list that included my name, with a notation of my teacher's pension amount and the approximate value of my house. My own son had considered targeting me for this scheme. With Marcus's help, I developed a methodical approach to gathering evidence. We needed to understand exactly what Robert was involved in, who the other players were, and most importantly, how to get Emily safely out of that house. I set up a secure email account and encrypted storage for everything we collected. Marcus introduced me to a forensic accountant who helped analyze the financial documents Laura had gathered, adding them to what we could legally access about Robert's recent transactions. This is a classic affinity fraud operation, the accountant explained. They target people within the same community or social group. In this case, it appears they were focusing on members of Robert's church and his business associates. They use the trust people have in fellow community members to lower their guard. We discovered Robert had withdrawn over $380,000 from various accounts in the past year, including cashing out his 401k and paying the substantial penalty for early withdrawal. Property records showed he'd not only taken a second mortgage, but had recently applied for a home equity line of credit, attempting to extract every dollar of value from the house. When I managed to meet Emily at her school library under the guise of dropping off some books she needed, she slipped me a USB drive. "Mom's financial passwords," she whispered. I remembered she kept them in a special notebook. I found accounts Dad doesn't know about. That night, accessing the accounts Laura had kept separate, I discovered she had set aside $85,000 in a trust for Emily that Robert couldn't touch, money that would be vital for what was to come. Marcus and I carefully documented everyone coming and going from Robert's house. Using long-range photography equipment borrowed from a photographer friend, we captured clear images of at least 8 different individuals, including 2 that Marcus's contacts identified as having previous arrests for financial crimes in other states. The most disturbing evidence came from Emily herself. During another secret meeting at a coffee shop near her school, she showed me texts from her father. "Remember, what happens in our house is private business," one read. Another said, "If anyone asks about our visitors, they're just work colleagues helping with a special project." But worse were the threatening messages from someone saved in her phone as KC, clearly one of the partners in whatever scheme Robert was running. "Your father has made commitments. Failure is not an option. Make sure you understand what's at stake for your family." "He's scared too, Grandpa," Emily said, her voice trembling. "Sometimes I hear him on the phone late at night, arguing about money and timelines. Once I heard him say, 'I can't get blood from a stone. These people are tapped out.' The other night, he was sick in the bathroom. When I checked on him, he told me to go back to bed, but I saw the pill bottle. He's taking something for anxiety." I'd seen enough. This was no longer just about financial crimes. This was about Emily's safety, and perhaps even Robert's, though his was complicated by his apparent participation in the fraud. The situation deteriorated rapidly over the next 2 weeks. Emily reported that strange men were staying overnight at the house, claiming the guest bedroom and even sleeping on the living room sofa. "Dad told me not to come downstairs after 9 p.m. anymore," she texted from her friend's phone. "He installed a new lock on his office door. I can hear them in there late into the night, arguing about money and people who haven't paid." When Emily tried to visit a friend one Saturday, one of the men insisted on driving her and then waited in the car the entire time, making it impossible for her to speak freely. He said he was my security detail, but I know he's making sure I don't talk to anyone. Her school counselor called me, concerned about changes in Emily's behavior and appearance. She seems exhausted all the time, Mr. Peterson. When I asked if everything was okay at home, she burst into tears but wouldn't explain. We're required to report suspected abuse, but she insists nothing physical has happened. The most alarming development came when Emily managed to call me from the school office. "Dad took my phone permanently last night," she said, her voice shaking. "He found out I was texting Aunt Maggie. He went through all my messages and contacts. He said I was compromising operational security, whatever that means. Grandpa, he smashed my phone with a hammer right in front of me." "Did he hurt you?" I demanded, my heart in my throat. "No, not exactly. But he grabbed my arm really hard when I tried to stop him. And this morning, he said I can't attend Sarah's birthday party this weekend because he can't guarantee the security environment. I'm basically a prisoner, Grandpa. When I tried to call Robert to discuss this bizarre behavior, my call went straight to voicemail. When I drove by their house, the same security person was sitting in a car at the curb. He watched me intently as I drove past, even taking pictures of my car with his phone. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Peterson, your interest in your son's affairs has been noted. We suggest focusing on your retirement and leaving family business to family. Consider this friendly advice." The threat was unmistakable. I took the message to Marcus, who agreed it was time to accelerate our plans. "They're isolating Emily and warning off potential interference," he said gravely. "These are not good signs, Harold." The final straw came the following week when Emily didn't show up at school for 3 consecutive days. The attendance office reported that Robert had called claiming she had mononucleosis and would be out for at least 2 weeks. When I called Robert demanding to speak to Emily, his response chilled me. "Dad, you need to back off," he said, his voice cold and distant. "Emily is my daughter, and I make the decisions about her welfare. She's fine, just dealing with some teenage attitude issues that needed addressing. We're making some changes in how we handle her social contacts." "Robert, this isn't you," I pleaded. "Whatever you're involved in—" "You don't know anything," he cut me off. "I'm finally building something important, something that will secure our future. Emily just needs to understand that sometimes sacrifices are necessary." "Let me talk to her," I insisted. "That's not possible right now. She's lost her communication privileges. I'll have her call you when I feel she's ready to respect the rules of this house." The call ended, and I sat staring at the phone, a terrible realization settling over me. My son had crossed a line I never imagined possible. Emily wasn't just living in an uncomfortable situation. She was being held virtually captive by her own father. The decisive moment came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the grocery store when my phone buzzed with an email from Emily's secret account. The subject line alone made my blood run cold. "Help now." The message was brief. "They're moving me. Dad says I'm going to stay with his business associate Kevin at a lake house to keep me safe while they conclude operations. Leaving tomorrow. Address below. I'm scared, Grandpa. Kevin looks at me weird." I called Marcus immediately, reading him the address Emily had provided, a remote property about 2 hours north of the city. "This is escalating dangerously," Marcus said. "They're isolating her completely, away from school, friends, any potential witnesses. We need to move now." That evening I received a call from Robert. His voice sounded strained, almost unrecognizable. Dad, I wanted to let you know Emily's going on a little vacation with a trusted colleague of mine. She needs some time away from the distractions of school and social media. It's just temporary, maybe a month or two. A month or two? I repeated incredulously. In the middle of her school semester? Robert, what's really going on? It's complicated, Dad. Business matters. Look, I know you and Emily are close, but I need you to trust me on this. It's for her own protection. Protection from what exactly? I demanded. There was a pause. Then Robert lowered his voice. There's been some misunderstandings with certain investors. Nothing serious, just temporary cash flow issues that we're resolving. But some people get emotional about money. It's better if Emily isn't around while we sort things out. The implication was clear. Robert was in trouble with the people he'd defrauded, and somehow thought sending Emily away with one of his criminal associates was a solution. Robert, listen to yourself, I pleaded. You're talking about sending your 16-year-old daughter away with a grown man she barely knows because you're afraid of angry investors. This is madness. You don't understand the opportunity we're on the verge of, he snapped. Once this next phase completes, we'll have returns that will set us up for life. Everything I've done has been for Emily's future. Does that include terrifying her, isolating her, taking away her phone and monitoring her every move? I couldn't keep the anger from my voice any longer. You've been talking to her behind my back, Robert accused, his tone hardening. This is exactly why she needs space from influences that undermine my authority. I'm her father, and I decide what's best. Your wife would be ashamed of what you're doing, I said quietly. There was silence, then an explosion of rage I'd never heard from my son before. Don't you dare bring Laura into this. You have no idea what pressures I'm under, what I've had to do since she died. Emily is my daughter, and you have no right to interfere. In the background, I could hear a door open and a male voice say something urgent to Robert. I have to go, Robert said abruptly. Emily leaves tomorrow at noon. Don't try to contact her. She needs to focus on following instructions and keeping quiet about family business. The call ended, and I sat in stunned silence for only a moment before calling Marcus. It's happening tomorrow, I told him. We need to execute the plan now. The next morning, I was parked a block away from Robert's house by 8 a.m., watching through binoculars as activity unfolded. A black SUV arrived at 9:30. And the man I recognized as Kevin carried luggage from the house. At 10:15, I saw Emily appear briefly at an upstairs window, her expression blank and defeated. At 11 OI, Marcus arrived with 2 colleagues, all retired law enforcement, and our legal team. At 11:30, the court clerk called to confirm that the emergency hearing had resulted in a temporary custody order based on the evidence we'd presented of Emily's unsafe living situation. At 11:45, we approached the house. Myself, Marcus, his colleagues, a social worker, and 2 active police officers who were former students of mine and had agreed to assist once they reviewed our evidence. Robert opened the door, his face draining of color when he saw our assembled group. Dad, what the hell is this? I handed him the court order. I'm taking Emily with me, Robert. The judge has granted me emergency temporary custody based on evidence of an unsafe and potentially abusive living environment. This is ridiculous, he sputtered, trying to close the door. One of the officers blocked it with his foot. Sir, we need to see Emily Peterson immediately, the officer stated firmly. From inside came a commotion, raised voices, something crashing. Then Emily appeared in the hallway, her face lighting up when she saw me. Grandpa, she cried, rushing forward. Kevin appeared behind her, grabbing her arm. Nobody's going anywhere until... He didn't finish the sentence because Marcus stepped forward, his expression deadly serious. Take your hand off that girl right now, or I'll make sure you regret it. In that moment, with witnesses present and legal documents in hand, the facade crumbled. Kevin released Emily's arm, backing away with his hands raised. Emily rushed into my arms, sobbing with relief. Robert stood frozen, watching as his daughter clung to me. You don't understand what you're doing, he said hoarsely. There are people expecting results, expecting money. They won't just let this go. Then perhaps you should focus on that problem instead of intimidating your daughter, I replied coldly. Emily's coming with me, where she'll be safe while you deal with the consequences of your choices. As we left with Emily, Robert called after us, his voice breaking. Dad, please, they'll come after all of us if this falls apart. I was trying to protect her. I turned back one last time. No, Robert, you were using her as a shield. There's a difference. With Emily safely beside me, we walked away from the house where my once loving son had become someone I no longer recognized. Once Emily was safely settled in my home, protected by security measures Marcus had helped arrange, I knew it was time to reveal what I had kept hidden for so many years. Emily, I said one evening after dinner, there's something I need to show you. I took her to my home office and unlocked the hidden safe behind the bookshelf, a security measure that had always seemed excessive until now. From it, I removed a thick folder of financial documents. Your grandfather isn't just a retired teacher, I explained, as I spread the papers across my desk. Before I met your grandmother, I worked in software development during the early tech boom. I was part of a startup that was acquired by a major company in 1985. Emily's eyes widened as I showed her the original stock certificates and the investment portfolio statements. I kept my wealth quiet for many reasons. First, because I wanted your father to develop his own work ethic without expecting handouts, and later, because money changes how people see you and treat you. The documents revealed the truth. I had a net worth of just over $4.2 million, not a vast fortune by billionaire standards, but substantial security that had been carefully managed and grown over decades. All these years of living modestly, in the same house I bought 30 years ago, driving the same car for a decade, it wasn't because I had to, but because I chose to. Material things never mattered much to me after your grandmother died. Emily stared at the statements in disbelief. But you gave Dad money for college, for the house down payment. You helped with Mom's medical bills. Of course I did. Family helps family. But I never revealed the full extent of my resources because I wanted Robert to stand on his own 2 feet. I planned to divide the estate between him and any charitable causes that mattered to us after I was gone. I showed Emily the legal documents my attorney had prepared years ago. Your mom knew. After she got sick, I told her everything to ensure she had peace of mind about your future. The college fund I set up for you was just the beginning. There's a trust in your name that activates when you turn 21, or if something happens to me. Does Dad know? She asked quietly. I shook my head. Not the full extent. He knew I had some investments beyond my teacher's salary, but he never knew about the tech company acquisition. Your mother agreed it was better that way, especially after she began noticing his interest in get-rich-quick schemes. I pulled out one more document, papers from my attorney confirming that we'd secured Emily's trust against any attempts by Robert to access it, along with protection for Laura's separate accounts. I've made arrangements with Maggie to be your co-guardian, I explained. If anything happens to me, she has instructions and access to everything you'll need. Emily was quiet for a long moment, processing this revelation. So, all this time when Dad was getting involved with those people, promising them returns and trying to impress them with his business savvy. He had no idea his father could have legitimately funded whatever reasonable business he wanted to pursue, I confirmed sadly. But that's not how integrity works. Money given isn't the same as money earned, and money obtained by deceiving vulnerable people is nothing but theft, dressed up in business language. We sat together in silence, the weight of these revelations settling between us. Finally, Emily looked up at me, her eyes showing a maturity beyond her 16 years. "Grandpa, can we help Dad? Even after everything, he's still my father." I squeezed her hand. "We'll try, sweetheart. But first, we need to make sure you're safe and he faces the consequences of his actions. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for someone we love is to let them experience the results of their choices." 3 days after we brought Emily to safety, the situation with Robert exploded into public view. The FBI raided his house, having been investigating the investment scheme for months. According to news reports, they seized computers, financial records, and arrested 3 men found on the premises, though Robert himself wasn't among them. Marcus's contacts informed us that Robert had fled just hours before the raid, apparently tipped off by someone inside the operation. His car was found abandoned at a bus station 50 miles away. "He's running," Marcus said grimly when he came to update us, "which means he knows exactly how serious this is." The FBI agents who interviewed Emily were gentle but thorough, and her testimony, along with the evidence Laura had gathered before her death, provided crucial information about the operation. The scheme had defrauded over 30 victims, mostly retirees and elderly individuals, of approximately $2.8 million total. "Your daughter-in-law was gathering evidence to report this before she became ill," the lead agent told me privately. "She was a brave woman. The records she kept have been invaluable to our case." A week after the raid, I received a call from an unknown number. When I answered, I heard Robert's voice, tense and exhausted. "Dad, I'm in trouble," he said without preamble. "I know you are, son. Where are you?" "I can't tell you that. They might be monitoring your phone." His paranoia was palpable. I need you to know I didn't mean for things to go this far. It started small, just some investments that seemed too good to pass up. Then when I lost our savings, they offered me a way to make it back by bringing in other investors. And now innocent people have lost their life savings, I said firmly. People like the ones I taught with for 30 years, people who trusted you. There was a long pause. "Is Emily okay?" "She's safe, which is more than I can say for you right now. Robert, turn yourself in. Whatever hole you're hiding in, whatever you think these people can offer, it's not worth throwing your life away completely." "They'll kill me, Dad," he whispered. "I know too much, and I've seen their operation." "Then give the FBI something they can use. Make a deal. But running will only make things worse." Another long silence then. "There's a storage unit. Unit 247 at Safekeep Storage on Riverton Drive. The key is hidden in Mom's old jewelry box, the one with the broken hinge that Emily kept. There are records there, everything. Names, accounts, the whole operation. I kept it as insurance. I'll make sure it gets to the right people, I promised. Tell Emily." His voice broke. "Tell her I'm sorry. I thought I was building something for us after her mom died. I thought I could make things right." "Robert," I began, but the line went dead. The FBI recovered the documents from the storage unit the next day. 2 weeks later, Robert was apprehended trying to cross the Canadian border. The evidence he had preserved proved instrumental in dismantling the entire fraud network, leading to the arrest of 12 people across 4 states. I was allowed to visit Robert in detention while he awaited trial. The man who sat across from me looked like a shell of my son, thin, pale, with dark circles under his eyes. Kevin was going to take Emily to what they called a holding property, he confessed, unable to meet my gaze. It's where they keep people who might talk, family members who know too much. I convinced myself she'd be safe, that it was just temporary, until we sorted everything out. But deep down, I knew. He finally looked up, his eyes filled with tears. You saved her, Dad. Thank you for being the father I failed to be. At Robert's sentencing hearing, the judge took into account his eventual cooperation and the fact that he had preserved evidence that helped build the case. He received 8 years instead of the potential 20 the charges carried. Several victims of the scheme spoke at the hearing, including elderly couples who had lost their retirement savings and a widow who had invested her husband's life insurance money. As painful as it was to hear their stories and see the harm my son had caused, I made myself listen to every word. Emily sat beside me, holding my hand tightly, bearing witness to the consequences of her father's choices. When it was Robert's turn to speak, he stood slowly, his shoulders slumped with the weight of what he had done. I have no excuses, he said, his voice carrying in the quiet courtroom. What began as desperation after my wife's death became greed, then fear, and finally a nightmare I couldn't escape. I betrayed my father, who sacrificed everything for me. I betrayed my daughter, who deserved protection and safety, and I betrayed all of you who trusted me with your hard-earned money. He paused, taking a shaky breath. I can't undo the harm I've caused, but I will spend every day trying to make amends in whatever way I can. As they led him away, Emily whispered, "Will he ever be Dad again?" I hugged her close. I hope so, sweetheart. But that journey is his to make now. With Robert serving his sentence, Emily and I established a new normal. She transferred to a school closer to my home, where she gradually began to make friends and rebuild her confidence. The court formalized our custody arrangement, with regular check-ins from a family services caseworker who consistently reported positive progress. Using a small portion of my savings, I hired a therapist specializing in family trauma to work with Emily. Dr. Keller helped her process the complicated emotions of having a father she loved, who had also endangered her safety. I feel guilty sometimes, Emily confessed one evening after therapy. Part of me misses Dad, even after everything he did. That's natural, I assured her. Loving someone doesn't stop just because they make terrible choices. Your father lost his way after your mother died, but the man who raised you for 14 years before that person is still somewhere inside him. Our home became a sanctuary of healing and new beginnings. I converted my rarely used formal dining room into a study space for Emily, complete with a new computer setup and bookshelves for her growing collection of finance and business ethics textbooks. The walls, once bare, now displayed photos of happier times. Emily with Laura at the beach, Robert teaching Emily to ride a bike. Our extended family gathered for holidays before everything fell apart. I don't want to erase him from our lives, Emily said as we hung these photos. I need to remember that good people can make terrible choices and that life isn't black and white. The holidays were particularly challenging that first year. Thanksgiving had always been Robert's favorite, with his traditional turkey carving ceremony and his famous cranberry sauce recipe that he guarded like a state secret. Emily and I invited Maggie and a few close friends to join us, creating new traditions while honoring old ones. Dad would put cinnamon in the cranberry sauce, Emily told me as we prepared dinner. He never wrote down the recipe, but I watched him make it every year. Together we experimented until we got the taste just right, a small victory in preserving family connections that still had value. We visited Robert once a month. Those visits were difficult at first, stilted conversations full of awkward pauses and painful reminders. But gradually, something began to shift. The manipulative, paranoid man who had threatened his daughter's safety faded, and glimpses of the son I remembered emerged. In prison, Robert had joined a restorative justice program, meeting with victims of similar financial crimes to understand the true impact of what he had done. He enrolled in every educational opportunity available, earning certifications in computer programming and accounting. "I want to use what I know to help people avoid scams," he told us during our 6th month of visits. "Maybe work with senior centers to teach fraud awareness when I get out." He began keeping a journal of reflections that he sometimes shared with us, honest, painful examinations of how he had rationalized his choices and the moment-by-moment decisions that led him from an honest man to someone capable of endangering his own daughter. "The hardest part," he confided during one visit, "is accepting that I can't undo what I've done. I can't give those people back their retirement years free from financial worry. I can't give Emily back the months of fear and confusion." Working with the prosecutor's office and the FBI, I established a restitution fund for the victims of the investment scheme. Though I couldn't replace everything that had been lost, I was able to provide significant help to those most vulnerable, the elderly victims who had no means to rebuild their savings. Mrs. Abernathy, a 78-year-old widow who had lost $120,000 in the scheme, broke down in tears when she received the first restitution payment. "This means I can keep my house," she told me, clutching my hands. "I thought I'd have to move in with my son's family and be a burden to them." I arranged for financial counselors to work with each victim, ensuring the money they received would be properly managed and protected from future scams. Several victims later joined our advocacy group, turning their painful experiences into warnings for others. "You don't have to do this, Dad," Robert said when he learned of my efforts. "I'm not doing it for you," I replied honestly. "I'm doing it because it's right, and because I spent my life teaching young people that actions have consequences, but also that mistakes don't have to define us forever." Emily blossomed in her new environment. Her grades improved, she joined the school's debate team, and she started volunteering at a local senior center, perhaps her own way of making amends for her father's actions. She developed a special workshop for seniors called Protect Your Nest Egg that became so popular the center had to move it to a larger venue to accommodate all who wanted to attend. "You know what's amazing, Grandpa?" she said after one successful workshop. "When I'm helping others protect themselves, I don't feel like the girl whose dad went to prison anymore. I'm just Emily, and I'm making a difference." Her confidence grew steadily. The nightmares that had plagued her in the first months, dreams of being taken away by strangers while Robert watched impassively, gradually subsided. Her friends from school began visiting our home, filling it with teenage laughter that seemed miraculous after everything we'd been through. On her 17th birthday, I gave her a letter that Laura had written for her before she died, which I had found among the papers Robert had asked me to store. "My dearest Emily," it began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer there to guide you, but know that a mother's love doesn't end with her last breath. It continues in every beat of your heart, in every kind choice you make, in every moment you choose courage over fear." Emily read it through tears, tracing her fingers over her mother's handwriting. She knew, didn't she? About what Dad was getting involved in? She suspected, I acknowledged. She was trying to protect both of you. That night, Emily made a decision. I want to study finance in college, she announced. I want to understand the systems that can be used to hurt people, so I can help protect them instead. I smiled, recognizing Laura's strength and integrity shining through in her daughter. By her senior year, Emily had been accepted to 3 top universities with strong business ethics programs, each offering substantial scholarships in recognition of her advocacy work. Our home continued to evolve as Emily prepared for college. We converted the spare bedroom into a guest room for Maggie's frequent visits. The backyard, once neglected, became a peaceful garden where Emily studied and I read in the evenings. We planted a cherry tree in Laura's memory on the anniversary of her death, a living reminder of her influence that would continue to grow and flourish. As for me, I found new purpose in advocating for stronger protections for elderly investors. I spoke at community centers and retirement homes, sharing an anonymized version of our family's story as a warning. Marcus often joined me, adding his expertise in fraud detection. What began as informal talks grew into a structured program that eventually received state funding for expansion to rural communities, where residents were particularly vulnerable to financial predators. You've created something important from something terrible, Marcus told me after we finished a presentation to a room of over 200 seniors. That takes a special kind of resilience. The journalists who covered Robert's case wanted to interview me numerous times, especially when they learned of my secret wealth and how I had used it to help the victims. I declined most requests, preferring to work quietly behind the scenes. This wasn't about publicity or redemption. It was about making something meaningful from the wreckage of my son's choices. When a documentary filmmaker approached us about featuring our advocacy work, I initially refused, but Emily surprised me by suggesting we participate, not to focus on Robert's crimes, but on the work being done to help victims and prevent future fraud. People need to see that something good can come from terrible mistakes, she argued, and maybe someone watching will recognize the warning signs in their own family before it's too late. The resulting film, Trust Betrayed, A Path to Redemption, won awards at several film festivals and was used in training programs for financial advisors and bank employees across the country. 18 months after Robert's sentencing, we received news that his cooperation had led to the arrest of the scheme's mastermind in another state. His sentence was reduced by 2 years, not recognition of this assistance. I'm proud of you for doing the right thing, I told him during our next visit. Too little, too late, he responded with a sad smile. It's never too late to choose a better path, right? I countered. Your mother taught me that. Robert began teaching fellow inmates basic financial literacy and how to recognize predatory schemes. The prison administrator told us his classes had the highest attendance rate of any offered, with a waiting list of inmates hoping to join. They listen to me because I'm not preaching from some ivory tower, Robert explained. I've been where many of them are, desperate enough to make choices that hurt people I cared about. As we prepared to leave that day, Robert asked if he could speak privately with Emily for a moment. I stepped away, watching from a distance, as my granddaughter sat across from her father, both of them with tears in their eyes. Later, in the car, Emily was quiet for a long while before finally speaking. Dad asked for my forgiveness today, she said softly. He said he understands if I can't give it yet, or ever. And what did you tell him? I asked. I told him that forgiveness isn't something you just give once, and it's done. It's a choice you make every day. I said I'm working on it day by day. She turned to look at me, her mother's wisdom reflected in her eyes. Is that okay?" "More than okay," I assured her, my heart full of pride for the remarkable young woman she was becoming. "That's exactly right." That evening, as we sat on the porch swing watching fireflies appear in the gathering dusk, Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "You know what's strange, Grandpa? If none of this had happened, if Dad hadn't gotten involved with those people, if I hadn't sent that message during our video call, I'd never have known how strong I could be. We wouldn't be helping all those people. Sometimes I think Mom somehow knew what would happen, and that's why she left those clues for us to find." I put my arm around her shoulders, marveling at her capacity to find meaning in tragedy. "Your mother was the wisest person I've ever known. She believed that no experience, however painful, is wasted if we learn from it and use it to help others." Emily nodded. "That's what I want to do with my life, take the broken pieces and build something better with them." In that moment, watching the sky darken and the first stars appear, I felt a peace I hadn't known since before Laura's illness. Our family had been shattered, but not destroyed. From the fragments, we were creating something new, something strong enough to withstand whatever storms might come next. 6 months later, Emily and I sat together on the porch swing of my house, our house now, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Do you think things will ever be normal again?" she asked, leaning her head against my shoulder. I thought carefully before answering. "Not the same kind of normal we had before, but maybe something new and stronger, something built on truth rather than secrets and lies." Emily nodded, seeming to find comfort in this honest assessment. "Grandpa," she said after a moment, "remember that video call? When I typed, 'Don't speak, just listen'?" "I'll never forget it," I replied. "You were so brave." "I was terrified," she admitted, "but I kept thinking about what Mom always told me, that doing the right thing and the easy thing are rarely the same thing." I put my arm around her shoulders, marveling at how wisdom could pass through generations, surviving even the darkest of times. "You know," I said, "your grandmother used to say that life isn't about waiting for the storms to pass, but learning to dance in the rain." Emily smiled. "I think we're learning, aren't we?" As the last light of day faded and the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, I knew she was right. We were learning to heal, to hope, to build something new from broken pieces. And in that moment, watching my granddaughter's face lifted toward the stars, I felt profound gratitude for second chances and the courage to seize them. "Yes," I answered, "we certainly are. And you, hearing our story now, what would you do if someone you loved sent you a message saying, 'Don't speak, just listen'? Would you have the courage to act, to stand up against those who would harm the vulnerable, to fight for what's right, even when it means confronting painful truths? Sometimes the greatest acts of love require not words, but the wisdom to listen and the courage to act on what we hear."